Thank you very much, Sabine, and welcome everyone to this fireside chat with Leonora. I hope I'm pronouncing your name
It's
properly.
perfect. It's perfect.
Leonora Miano, and with the apologies for the slightly late start due to technical issues, which we have resolved. So good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. It's a pleasure to have you all with us, and it's an even greater pleasure to be part of this session with the Women in Literature Festival for us. And it's my great honor and privilege to be in sort of part of this conversation, and I hope we'll be hearing mostly from Leonora and less from
Oh, I
myself.
don't think so.
So, so to introduce Leonora, she is a major voice of French-speaking literature, a novelist, playwright, and essayist. She's the author of some 20 books. Her works explore sub-Saharan and diasporic experiences as expressions of the universal human condition. She was awarded and my French is terrible, so I'm not going to attempt to say this, the Prix
You should. Goncourt, Goncourt,
I'll be
Goncourt.
terribly English and say it completely wrong. So, in 2006, for her novel and Contours du jour qui vient, I think, the Prix Femina and the Grand Prix du Roman Métis in
Yes.
2013 for Season of the Shadows, which was published by Seagull Books in 2018. In 2020, the University of Lorraine, in collaboration with the University of the Greater Region, which brings together 6 European academic institutions, created the Frontiers Leonora Miano Literary Prize in recognition of her writings and commitments. She curates the Quilombola, have I got that right?
Yeah.
Quilombola series at Seagull Books, and Seagull are an independent publisher in Calcutta, India. And I love the Indian Ocean links here, so we'll hopefully have a chance to talk a little bit about that as well. She is also the founder of the Colombo Publishing, which is located in Lome, Togo, where she lives. So there is a lot more to Leonora, and I hope that in this fireside chat we will have an opportunity to get to know her a bit more. So thank you and welcome for Leonora, and thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So that was a formal introduction to you. I would like to start us off with a very simple question and ask you to tell us about your journey as a writer. Where did you start from and where are you now?
Oh, I don't know if I could really answer that in a scholarly, intellectual manner because when I started to write, I was just a little girl. I was 8. I had no literary culture per se, but I needed to speak. I needed to express myself about things that people around me wouldn't talk about. So for a long time, writing for me has been that for a very long time. And I did not imagine that as a career. I, I never wanted to become a writer. I wanted to become a singer. But um, writing was, for me, a means to cope with life and to remain alive. So it acquired a very strong importance in my life. So that when I was, say, 25, 27, around that, I said to myself that since it was taking so much a place in my life, I had to share it. But I still hoped at the time that I'd become a writer, a singer. I didn't become a singer, become a famous writer, but I still hope to become a singer when I grow up. So I don't know how to talk about my journey as a writer. What I will say is that for a long time, writing was needed in my life to, as I said, to cope with life because it came from a place of pain. But now I am much older and I'm not in pain anymore. So writing is not that necessary to me. I write to amuse myself today. I do not write to remain alive. And I might even retire slowly in a few years to do, to gardening or something else, for instance.
Okay. Um, Thank you for sharing that. And I think there's so much that you've said there that I would like us to take a moment to think about, to cope with life
Yes,
and
I
to
really had
remain.
to. I really had to. My childhood was not very happy, though I was brought up in a very comfortable, not really wealthy, but comfortable household. But our family wasn't happy.
Mhm,
And very early on, I had to experience uh, sexual violence that made me write, made writing necessary because I couldn't talk about it.
mhm,
But now I'm not in that place anymore, in that same place. I'm not that little girl
mhm,
anymore. So there's less rage. If you came across my first novels,
mhm,
these were very violent and disturbing novels. And um, people said a lot that I wrote about, that I displayed, depicted a violent Africa, but my novels were not about Africa. Novels are never about places.
mhm,
They're always about the person who is writing.
mhm,
So the violence and the rage in those novels were
mhm,
mine alone. It was a way to expel
mhm,
uh, the torment, the
mhm,
pain that I could not voice in another way.
mhm, mhm. Well, thank you for being so open with us.
Oh,
And
I'm old enough for that.
it takes a long time. So I think the question I'd like, if I may ask from that, where you talk about the torment and the pain and the anger and sexual violence. I mean, that is such a, it's so sad, but it's so true that that is such a quote unquote normal part of many women's lives.
Yes, very
And
commonplace, unfortunately.
what was it that sort of inspired you to write about the experience, to use writing as a way to exercise the kind of pain, as it were?
Well, first, I did not want to write. I wanted to talk. I
Hmm.
wanted to talk to people around me and to a person particularly, but they would not hear me. And just like that, by chance, I started writing. I did not write stories at the time. I wrote poetry, and I felt such a feeling of freedom and even power that it stayed with me for those reasons because I could write about anything that crossed my mind. I could write, so speak without being interrupted. Uh, and I felt free and powerful.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this is the main reason why writing became uh, uh, a very useful tool for me in an environment where uh, the speech around intimate issues was not welcome.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk about anything political, philosophy, literature, anything cultural. Uh, that was very, very much encouraged. But when your speech dwelt on the intimate, the personal, it wasn't welcome. And my very first writings of poetry allowed me to, you know, uh, 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 say, not really say, because I did not write about my experience, I did not write about the pain, but I wrote things that made me feel safe
Mm-hmm.
and empowered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what's really important, I think, for women listening to this, from what you were saying, and for someone like myself listening to this as well, and I have some kind of ghosts in the cupboard that I have to deal with, or I deal with from time to time from childhood, and sexual violence is something that takes away your power, doesn't it? It takes away the
Yes,
power. So it's really important to hear you say, and how you reclaimed that power, and how you invested yourself in your writing through poetry and through language, to also to set yourself against an establishment that expects you to write a particular type of story. And when you don't write that story, you also face judgment. And
of
you,
course, especially if you're a girl.
if you're a girl, and you talked about Africa as well, and sort of being a representative, and sort of being put in a position where you were being told, well, this is not the image you should be representing. Could you talk, would you like to sort of expand on that a little bit?
Oh, that was very much said when my books began to be published, because they were published in France, a place where Africans and people of African descent are a minority, so they need uh, to see a beautiful image of themselves, or what they think would be a beautiful image of themselves. But I grew up in Africa, and when you grow up in Africa, you're not a minority. So you do not build your personality as if you were a minority. So the majority gaze has no I wouldn't say it has no impact, but it doesn't have the same impact. You know you're a person, you know that you belong to a people just like any other people in the world, that your community is not perfect,
Mm-hmm.
that crime is committed in every community in the world, that human beings, they are very often ugly, no matter where they come from. And so there is no image issue for you. But I understand why, for people who felt discarded, marginalized in the French society, they had the impression that I was not helping the cause
Mm-hmm.
by revealing the dark sides of our African society. But I think we have to go to deal with our mess. For example, I am not an Afropean because I'm not European. I was in France. I was an immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
I was brought up in Africa, but people like my own daughter, who grew up in France, who was born there, are Afropeans. And I think that it's very important to name that category of the how to put it, that category among the various people of African descent, because being a European, they have a unique experience. They belong to a world that was able for a very long time to tell its story without mentioning their presence, because Europe is so ancient. You can do the same in the Americas because the natives were set aside and everybody else came from somewhere. So you cannot tell the history of the United States, for instance, without mentioning people who came from Africa. You, same with Brazil, same with a lot of places in the Americas. But in Europe, it's possible. So it shapes a very particular sensitivity that has to find its place and to deliver its particular message as well.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you, Leonora. I think I feel as if, we could talk about this for a lot longer because I have many questions. I was thinking I haven't even asked you about the meaning of Quilombola and the indigenous context that is part of the story. That is also important to that is part of what you were saying, but also connected. I mean, not exactly what you're talking about with reference to the definition of Afropean, but how it connects with all those different stories as well and narratives, and how that idea, certainly in Europe, of nationalism, and this far right nationalism particularly, which
Yeah.
insists on a particular type of purity and a sense of who can be European, or who can be, in the case of Britain, British, or in the case of France, French, and those are can be are very exclusionary types of conversations for people of diasporic connections, and so to have that heritage and for that recognition to be available through these conversations is such an important part of changing and transforming and intervening in those narratives of kind of purism and purity of belonging, and where we come from. So thank you so much, Leonora, for joining us and
Thank
for
you for having me. And
thank
sorry for the power cuts.
not at all, not at all. We're glad to have got you in the end.